So we just wanted to say welcome. We're really happy that you decided to come out tonight and see what you need to know since you're interested in running for council. We're delighted to see so many of you here. We're especially delighted to have Alison Hattrick here with us. Alison is all the way from Victoria to present a session for you. She's got a great presentation, and the best thing of all, she loves to answer questions. So jump in and please ask your questions. So without further ado, welcome Alison. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to see people in the room. I have done these in a couple of places where there were only a couple of people, and it's really not great. A couple of things about me. You should know that I'm a recovering elected official. I spent 3 terms on my home council of the District of Central Saanich, and the last term I was mayor. It was really, really challenging and interesting, and an amazing life experience, but not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. And I think it's so fantastic. I was here 4 years ago, and there were probably this many people then too. I think it's so great. I mean, clearly you're engaged and interested and and want to know something. Oh, I guess I should also say, other than being an elected official, I'm a registered professional planner. That's my sort of professional background. And I've taught at a whole variety of universities, UVic, Dalhousie, University of Alberta, and currently with Capilano College, or Capilano University. That's terrible for me to say Capilano College. So I do a lot of this kind of stuff and do a lot of council orientation at the beginning of term of office and strategic planning and that kind of stuff. This will be way more interesting if you ask me questions, because if I'm just here going blah 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 blah, you might just doze off. So it'd be much better as a dialogue. Can I ask if any of you are currently elected? Oh, awesome. So Spellemcheen and Armstrong? Yeah, okay. I recognize the face. Great, good. And the rest of you are just maybe thinking about it. So that's fantastic. We've got more than a couple of councils in the room. That's good. I bet you have all kinds of questions. I don't expect you to read a lot of the stuff on these slides. I'm happy to leave this with Patty, and she can share it with you if you want, so you can really go through it. But so don't worry too much if you can't read the words. But if you haven't been elected before, and maybe even if you have been elected, you probably have all kinds of questions about elected office, like how much time it takes, what does in camera mean. What does confidentiality mean? What does it take to be a good councillor? Those are sort of typically on people's minds when they're thinking about running, and it's kind of hard to find answers to those questions unless you know somebody who's been in elected office or you have a session like this. So my goal tonight is to, try to demystify some of the practicalities, at least, about elected office. I'm almost afraid to ask this question of this group. But are there some top of mind questions that you would especially like me to address while we're here? Anything that's really burning? Yeah.
Roles of city staff as opposed to roles in the purview of councillors.
Yeah, who does what? Yep, definitely big part of what I'm going to talk about. Yeah, that's great. Anybody else? Well, as we get partway through, if I'm not giving you what you think you need, then I want you to stop me and tell me to talk about something else. So the purpose of tonight is to encourage, participation in your elections. I mean, this is, God, especially in 2026, this is so important, right? It's so important in our society, in our world, that people are interested, they're engaged, and they're willing to step up to be part of government, right? because God, where would we be without it? And to give some insight into the role of the mayor and councillors, and a little bit, anybody interested in running as an electoral area official? An electoral area director? Okay. Because I have put in a couple of slides about that just in case, but if there's not too much interest, we'll just skip over those. To clarify, this is going to be music to your ears, clarify, the responsibilities of staff and the responsibilities of elected officials, and help, to understand what governance is, what the decision-making process is, what kind of obligations you have as elected officials, and help you to reflect on whether or not you think you're ready to do this or you want to take this on, because it's not a small undertaking, as I think anybody who's been in elected office knows. It's time-consuming, it's demanding, and you're often at the end of the pointy stick. So what we'll cover, just going to talk a little bit about governance in your region, the city of Armstrong and the township of Spalumcheen, roles and responsibilities, working with staff, what does that relationship look like, what the role really looks like day to day, a little bit about financial stewardship and your ethical responsibilities, and then a little bit about running for office, and then we'll have questions and answers. So does that sound like a pretty good plan? Okay. Did I miss anything? So, I find that most people run for office because they want to do good. I've worked for almost 100 municipalities and regional districts in BC, and I would say, with a few exceptions, virtually every person that I've met, particularly in smaller communities, they want to do it because they want to give something to their community. They want to give back. They want to see something happen. They want to do something good. So that's probably on your mind. You might think that being an elected official is honorable. I did. I'm not sure that my constituents felt that, but I did. I thought, this is a role of responsibility. And I thought it was an honorable thing to do in my life. You might want to be a role model to others. I really wanted to be a role model for I had two quite young children when I first ran, and I really wanted them to see me participate actively in government. You might believe that, in order to have a healthy democratic system, you need good people to be in office, right? If the good people don't step up, then people that have some self-interest might be stepping up. Or maybe you want to lead change in your organization. You think that the path the community is going down isn't the right path, and you want to see a different path taken. There are some reasons that you... We had a conversation a couple of minutes ago, and there are some reasons that you ought not to be running for council. They shouldn't be your sole reason. They can be part of your reason for running. You're mad as heck at the incumbents. Right? I did disclose that, I was mad as heck at the incumbents when I ran first time too. But
company excluded.
But it wasn't the only reason I ran. If you just have one thing you want to do, I really want to build that rec center, I really want to build that road, and I'm going to spend my whole term focusing on that. It's really not fair to do that, and it's going to be a really long 4 years, and because there are a lot of other responsibilities you'll have to take on. If you need the money, I didn't check at what the compensation is for elected officials in these two communities, but I suspect it's not a lot. So money often isn't the best motivator. If you think government can run just like a business, you might just want to park that one and think about it for a while, because government is not business. Government can be efficient, it can be effective, like a business can be, but there are all kinds of other responsibilities that government has that businesses don't have. Government isn't a a profit-making enterprise. If we had to run a fire department like a business, we'd close the fire department down because you know what? It's a money loser. So you really have to sort of think about that sort of simplistic way of thinking about government. You think being an elected official is an easy job? You know, you'll find out pretty quick, not so easy. If you think it will help your business, that you'll get some kind of benefit from it, probably not a good idea. Or if you want to help somebody else's business, probably not the best reason. So you might want to think about some of those things. I just, in preparation for this, I had a little look. You know, it's funny because when I was here 4 years ago, I didn't do this. And this turned out to be a really interesting little dive into your communities because I learned things that I didn't know. Your two communities are really, really interesting. First of all, they're way older than I thought they were. You know, both of the communities are more than 100 years old. I was surprised, you know, duh. And then I was struck by how similar they are. Like population, very similar. Clearly, the land area, not similar, but both of them about 100 years old. And then when I started looking at the finances of the two communities and the tangible capital assets, very similar. So I thought that was really, really interesting. So two distinct communities. The fact that you've existed side by side for 100 years, my suspicion is there's some pretty deep feelings about why they shouldn't come together. You know, so, you know, so similar but different, I had to conclude. So I thought that was really, you know, really, really interesting. It must be a very interesting culture you have in the two communities living so close together. So I just want to talk a little bit about, you know, where does the authority for local government come from? Because like it doesn't just sort of appear out of nowhere. There's a whole structure of governance in Canada. This is, you know, the sort of the history lesson, and I'll be brief, but still I think it's important. You know, in Canada, everything flows from the Constitution Act. All of the powers of governance flow from there. And Section 92 of the Act divides the powers, all of the powers in the country between the federal government and the provincial governments. And the powers, the authority for local government was given to the provinces. So in Section 92, it says all local government affairs are going to be handled by the province. And so the province of BC has ultimate authority over local government. And there's all kinds of legislation, but there are two significant pieces of legislation in BC that lay out what local governments can do. And it's the Community Charter and the Local Government Act. And the Community Charter is broad general local government authority, and the Local Government Act has kept planning regional districts and elections. So, you know, there was an effort in the Gordon Campbell era to reform the Local Government Act, and they got part way. And they developed the Community Charter, and they didn't get to these things. They didn't get to reforming these things. So instead of having one act, like most provinces in BC, we have two. So they're sort of divided. But this is really important because, and you're probably aware of this in the news and stuff, is the province has ultimate authority. If the province doesn't like what a local government is doing, they just make a decision for you. So they have sort of loaned you authority, but you have no ultimate authority. So all of the powers of local affairs rests with the province of BC. So I just want to touch on, well, so what does some of that legislation say? So the Community Charter lays out what the purpose of local government is. You know, the purpose of Spalumcheen and the purpose of Armstrong. What is it they're supposed to be doing? So you're supposed to provide good government. You're supposed to provide for services and laws for your community. You're to steward the public assets, so the roads and the pipes in the ground, all that kind of stuff. The buildings. And they're to foster economic, social, and environmental well-being. So pretty broad, right? But the real nub of this, I think, is, good government, services and laws, so providing services to the community and all the bylaws and things, and stewarding, looking after the assets of the community. And you'll see, again, when we get to the finance section, that each of your 2 communities have a lot of assets worth a lot of money. But simply what do municipalities do? They deliver services. I mean, this is really the essence of why local governments exist. They exist to deliver services and to be a governance mechanism, so that people can express their wishes. You're a representative government. People tell you what they want, and you theoretically make it happen. So 2 sort of primary purposes. And then the role of City Council. So the City Council is the governing body. City Council makes all the decisions. They're ultimately responsible for everything that happens in the municipality. Council adopts policies and bylaws, so some things require bylaws, some things require policies, and they make decisions about those in order to make things happen. City Council appoints the CAO. That's their job. We'll talk a little bit more about that. They appoint the Chief Administrative Officer to carry out their wishes. Another significant role of the council is to adopt an annual financial plan, so the budget. Right? Council is completely responsible for the allocation of resources in the municipality. Adopt an official community plan, as you probably know, super important document that lays out what you can do with land within the municipality, and then the zoning bylaw as well, and then other regulatory bylaws. And then the City Council liaises with the public and then advocates to other levels of government usually for money, but for whatever is the topic of the day. So does that fit with your sense of what the role of council is? Have I missed anything for those of you who are elected? Anything else that you think? No? Not a small job. I think, it's so funny. I was dealing with, as I often do, dealing with a troubled council. We'll call them a troubled council. And almost the first thing I said to them was, you know that you're in total control. Council can do, within its legal authority, can make all the decisions, and they have all the control. They didn't feel like they had the control, but they do. You can give it to others. You can let the staff do it, or you can sort of allow So ultimately, though, the council has a lot of power if they choose to take it, which I would advocate they should. They're elected. That's what we elect elected officials for.
Would represent the public not be worthy of that list?
Sorry?
Represent the public? Wouldn't that be worthy of being on that list?
Yeah, I think you're right. When I said liaise with the public, that really, because they need, represent might be a better word, because, and this is sort of an ideological, point of view, but I really believe it's a representative government, that you ought to be representing the wishes of the people, and if you don't, anyways, they're going to turf you. So I happen to believe that that's the right thing to do, but if you don't, anyways, you're not going to be in office for very long. But, the problem is that in communities, I'm sure this is true in your communities, there's not one public.
No.
There's a whole bunch of publics. And so this is the real challenge for the elected officials, right, is to kind of weigh those different voices and try to have the wisdom of Job to make the right choice, right? That's the real challenge of being an elected official, I think. That's, surely keeps, on the really tough topics, keeps you up at night, right? And risks, that you might not be elected, which sometimes is a blessing, I thought I would just talk for a minute about regional districts because I think they're so misunderstood, and I think your region. I won't pretend to know a lot about your regional district, but I know a little bit about it, and I think they play such an important role, and they enable little communities to do things that they might not be able to do ordinarily on their own. So I just wanted to touch so where do regional districts fit into the system that we have? And it is a huge regional district that you have, and it has, I think, 6 municipalities and 5 electoral areas. And the whole intent of regional districts was to set up a mechanism to allow jurisdictions to cooperate on services. That's the essence of the regional district. It's a federation. It is a federation of members. It's not a senior level of government. Virtually everything the regional district does, except for the mandated services like solid waste, virtually everything that you do through the regional district is voluntary. And that some council in the past decided it was the service that you wanted in on, that you wanted to partner on. So I think I've just listed, we'll get to that. I've listed some of the services that you share. So regional districts provide services to member jurisdictions, enable jurisdiction to provide services in partnerships, because before regional districts existed, and they've been around for a little more than 50 years, there was no technical mechanism for local governments to partner on services. So if you want to share a recreation center or a sewage system or some kind of facility, it was very difficult to do. Technically, it was very difficult to do. So that was one of the significant drivers behind the creation of the regional districts. And then for electoral areas, they provide general government, right? One elected electoral area director. And then it's also an administrative agency for borrowing. So again, there's another sort of technical piece about how your borrowing goes through the regional districts. So here are some of the services, and this is just some of them. It's not a complete list, but here are some of the things that that the regional district does on behalf of the municipalities. So you'll see solid waste there and emergency services. Those are required by the province that they be done by the regional district with the member local governments. The Okanagan Basin Water Board, agricultural pest programs, regional transit, regional planning, and Spalumcheen has Greater Vernon Water and a septage facility. I guess it's run by the regional district on your behalf. So things that you can see, solid waste would be almost impossible for a little municipality like Armstrong to manage, right? You have to have partners. And so it's done on a region-wide basis. But I think it's really important to know that this is not a senior level of government, that it's a federation of the partners. And that your local governments, should you be elected, it's really helpful to appreciate that, the city of Armstrong or the township of Spalumcheen doesn't stand as this isolated little government. You're a piece of a much larger governance system, including, right up to the Constitution of Canada. And you're in a context of other agencies. Any questions about any of that? Yeah.
Just on the regional districts, the manner in which the members are represented at the regional district government level, is that consistent across the province, or is it by region? I'm really
good question.
Whether they're all elected or appointed?
They're all elected. The electoral area directors are directly elected by their area. So in electoral area B, they elect one electoral area director to represent them at the board. And, that person is mayor and council for that area, right? It's a particularly tough job, I think. In municipalities, the directors are elected by the people onto a council, and then the council decides who's going to the regional district. And, you know, and often there's some kind of practice around that. I have no idea what the practice is here. It's very common, and it used to be absolutely standard that the mayor would go. So if you have one seat, the mayor goes. That has begun to break down a bit. It was never in law, but it was the convention. Sometimes it's the top vote getters. So if you have, can I assume that Spallanzini and Armstrong have one member each, or do you have more? Just one? Just one each? And does the mayor go in both cases?
Surely goes on our behalf.
Yeah?
A counselor on
Okay. And in some places now, Saanich does this now, and City Victoria does this now, and maybe there are others. They actually have on their local election ballot that you can vote. You vote for people for council, and you vote whether or not you want them on the regional board. But it's not. This is not a legislated thing. It's an informal thing that they have decided to do, and so far that has held. You know, they have done what the voters told them to do. But you know, there's a lot of chatter, particularly in the media, about the regional district board should be directly elected, but you know, they are directly elected, right? And I think this is part of the confusion about regional districts. They are elected. They're elected by your constituents. You are there to represent them, right? Anything else about regional districts? That was a great question. Okay. So roles and responsibilities. So, and again, these are sections out of the charter because I always like to go right to the source of the information. Should you want to read little bits of the community charter, I mean, if you're running for mayor, I would suggest you go and read section 116 of the charter because this lays out what it is you're supposed to be doing. So the first thing here is the mayor is the head and chief executive officer of the municipality, and I have to tell you, there was a bill in the House, the House ceased to sit about 2 weeks ago. Bill 17 is in the House, and that clause is going to be removed. It's proposed to be removed. So this chief executive officer name has been very confusing, wasn't defined in the legislation, has caused all kinds of trouble because mayors have begun to think that they have all kinds of control and they really don't. So even though I have this underlined here, I'll just warn you that when the House comes back to sit, I think in October, I would expect this legislation, this amendment to be made along with some other amendments. But anyways, still the mayor is the head of the council, the leader of the council, and is expected to provide leadership to council. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. There's a duty or responsibility to communicate information to the council. So often the mayor becomes aware of things, and it's their responsibility to make that information flow both to the staff and to the rest of council. If the mayor is in the room, the mayor needs to chair the meeting, needs to preside at the meeting. And then the sort of key responsibility is that the mayor is the nexus, the connection with the staff. So council makes a decision, and it's the mayor's responsibility to communicate that through the CAO to the staff. I mean, all of that happens as a matter of process, but conceptually, that's what's supposed to be happening. The mayor is the voice of the council. And so with the direction of council gives general direction to the CAO. And then there's some provisions for the mayor to create standing committees. There's this provision to suspend municipal officers. This is also proposed to be changed, so stay tuned on that one. The mayor is always supposed to be reflecting the will of council. He's or she is the voice of council. I found this really challenging when I was mayor because sometimes I didn't agree with council and I didn't want to say what they wanted me to say. It was tough, but that's the job. And then other duties. Any questions about the role of the mayor?
Who teaches this to new councils and mayors when they are voted in?
Well, usually right after the election, there's a series of orientation sessions. So that's where they would.
In-house?
And you would hope that they would be at a session like this beforehand, and then at a session afterwards. And I'm of the mind that the learning doesn't happen right after the election. I mean, the learning curve of this job is very steep and ongoing. Usually some of it's done in-house and some of it's done externally. So there's an organization called the Local Government Leadership Academy. I sit on the board of that. And the Local Government Leadership Academy holds workshops across the province. And this would be part of the content that would be delivered. Helping newly elected officials and returning elected officials know what their job is and helping them to do it well. That's the goal. You look skeptical.
I am. Because I don't think I approve of that being done in-house.
Well, usually, I mean, this is what I would recommend, that the responsibilities for orientation kind of be split, right? So, the staff have all of the knowledge and the professional expertise about the operations. So generally they provide the orientation related to operations. So, what services do we provide? How much do they cost? What is the work plan going forward? That kind of stuff. And then the governance stuff is left to some kind of external learning opportunity. Either you bring somebody in or you go off to UBCM, LGLA.
Or your CAO does it. Or your CAO does it.
Yeah, and that's probably not uncommon. I like to think of the mayor as, the mayor needs some people skills because, they're the leader, they're the leader of a group. And their job really is to help the group make decisions. So they really have this facilitator role. I like to think of the mayor as a facilitator, facilitate the decision making of the group. Conduit to staff, chairs meetings, is the face of the organization to the outside, and fosters relationships around the table and with the CAO. Because, I'm not sure what the giggling's about, but if there aren't good relationships around the table and there isn't a good relationship with the staff, you're going to have dysfunction and the municipality is going to struggle, for sure. That's my experience. So you really want these relationships to work out. The mayor's not individually powerful. The mayor has almost no individual powers. There are a few exceptions to that in the case of emergencies, but really the mayor is one vote and his or her vote is equal to the vote of any councillor. So no individual power does not have the authority to direct staff without the support of council. The mayor can only direct staff if given direction by council to do so. And the mayor's not able to make decisions on his own. And you've seen, around BC in the last few years that some mayors have tried to do this and it hasn't gone very well. So then what's the role of council members? And this is out of the charter again. This is, I think, particularly vague, but You'd consider the well-being and interests of the municipality, contribute to the development and evaluation of policies and programs, participate in council meetings, carry out other duties. Really, the job of council members is to, understand the issues and make decisions, and then ensure that they are implemented. So a decision maker, a collaborator, and a listener. And again, there's no individual power here, only power and authority as a collective, as a group. This is one of the hardest things for people that run for office to get their minds around. And then I have some stuff about electoral area directors, but I'll just skip that. So yeah, just to emphasize this point that the governance is all done by a collective. So I think one of the real challenges, and this has become clearer over time to me, is that you run in an election as an individual, right? You're out there, you're campaigning, telling people you're better than anybody else, you're the perfect person for the job, you're going to do an awesome job. But then once you get elected, you have no individual authority. You only have authority as a group. So that's when you have to stop being an individual and start building these relationships around the table so that you can come together as a group and make decisions as a group. Any questions or observations about that?
I have another.
Yeah.
Just under the legislation, so by definition, the mayor is also a council member,
Exactly.
right? Because I didn't see the wills and powers of the other.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess what I struggle with a little bit is the council's ability to not only access, but work with closely the organization that it governs. So if it's directing through the mayor all the time,
Yep.
it seems like that would be a disconnect. Is that something that is municipality specific, i.e. council? Yes, we have access to staff, we go and sit with them, get into the organization. I know it's leadership not doing, I get it. But
Yeah, well, you can understand the problem that would be created if you had 7 people directly trying to have relationships with the staff. Because for sure, those 7 people are not all going to be pointing in the same direction. So that's why the collective has to make one decision. And that decision goes to the staff. So if you're asking about something a little bit softer, like can you have a relationship with the staff? Like can you ask for information? Can you be collegial? All of that is possible, but in terms of any kind of direction, not,
it's the softer
right?
side. Like the knowledge as a new counselor you gain from sitting down and listening around the organization, I think is invaluable.
Yeah, so on that kind of topic, every municipality finds a way of making that work, how much of that they can make work. Because, what I dealt with one, again, troubled council, very troubled council. And there was a council of 9, and each individual councillor was asking staff for information. And so I said, okay, well, if every one of you go and lean on the door of your director of planning for half an hour once a week, you've now taken 4.5 hours of the planner's time, half a day of work. So is that working for you? I mean, if the council wants to do that, it just probably means that they have to hire a planner for half a day a week. You have to add more resources to that. So in that case, what we settled on was we said, if a council member wanted information that was generally available to the public or wouldn't take more than 15 minutes of a staff member's time, they could ask for it. But if it was anything more than that, then the request had to come to council, and council had to make a decision about it. And that seemed to work, right? So you have to sort of find a way to make that work. The other thing I think around this topic that's really important is you really have to give the staff permission to say no, which is really hard to do, because the staff they're not going to want to say no to you. They are going to want to make you happy. And so if you want this to work really well, you have to allow them and give them permission to say, the really experienced staff will say something like, yeah, I think this is going to take a significant amount of time. Maybe we should put this on a council agenda for a discussion. And then council would ask for a report on something like that. So the role of staff. The staff has two roles. Their role is to give advice to council. They don't make decisions, they give advice. And certainly your senior staff in BC these days are all professionals. They're engineers, or they're accountants, or they're planners, or they're corporate officers. They all have credentials. We have a very accomplished staff in British Columbia. And so you want their professional advice, and you don't have to take it, but you want them to tell you what their professional advice is. And if you don't want to take it, then don't take it. That's where council has all the authority. So sometimes the council I was telling you about, that I said, well, you've got all the authority. They were feeling that staff was making all the decisions. And I said, well, staff can't make decisions. That's not their job. It's your job. If you don't take that responsibility on, that's on you. So their job is to give you professional advice, and you can take it or not. And then their second job is to implement your direction. So you make a decision, tell them to do something, and their job is to go and do it. And I think the more both the staff understand that division of power and council understands that division of power, the better the chances that you will have success. But once that starts being blurred, if council starts moving into the operations thing and start telling the public works people where to dig a ditch, or if the staff start making decisions that they ought not to be making, then you got trouble. So this is really worth spending some time on early on in the term, I think, so that you can really understand where that division of authority is. I like to think that this is a partnership of three, and the three partners all need to do their job. So council needs to set direction and make decisions. The staff needs to give good professional advice and implement council's direction, and the public needs to be informed, and they need to participate, which apparently isn't a problem here. So.
Then what happens if there's a disconnect between, for example, say your public and staff and council listening?
Then you have an election, which very fortunately is in 4 months, I guess. Yeah.
And if during the time that they're elected, if you have issues, concerns that aren't being addressed at this level, where do those go above the city level?
Well, there is the ombudsperson. You can take a complaint to the ombudsperson, right? And then there are the courts.
But the ombudsman's office is your next step.
Yeah, and there is an ombudsperson for local government that has some very good materials, by the way, if you go onto the website. Very good materials. So yeah, I think as long as you can get those three partners working reasonably well together, then you have a good chance of being a successful council. When it starts to break down, if you really feel there's a disconnect between the public and council, or if there's some confusion about roles between the staff and council, then you're going to have some problems. And then you're going to call me in or somebody else. So this goes back to what I'm going to talk about right now. This goes back to some of the questions earlier. Oh, sorry. There is what's called a one employee rule. Has anybody heard this phrase? And it's not really a rule. It's a model or a practice. In British Columbia and in most of Canada, we have what's called a council manager form of government. It's not the only structure you can have, but you have the mayor and council that have all the authority to make decisions and to do stuff, and you have a professional manager, so normally called a city manager, a chief administrative officer. And the mayor and council hire that chief administrative officer, and then the chief administrative officer hires and manages everybody else. The one employee rule. And that, the reason this practice is virtually universally adopted is because it's a very efficient and effective way of structuring a local government. You can imagine what it would be like. Let's just say you don't have a chief administrative officer and you have all of these senior managers and all of them report to council, right? You're going to be all over the map. So it's centralized into the CAO. And, you know, if the mayor and council aren't getting what they need from the CAO, then the CAO moves on, which happened, I think, in Armstrong. I don't know any of the details. It happened in Armstrong in the last term of office, right? So, I mean, that's what happens. We'll come back to this again, too. So it matters because it provides role clarity for the staff and for the council, keeps a clear distinction between governance and administration. And the line, you know, the line is drawn between the mayor and the CAO. There is a section of the community charter that talks about having a chief administrative officer, so section 147. It encourages respect for relationships, prevents confusion, micromanagement, potential staff conflict. It puts all of the accountability on the CAO. So the CAO is responsible for all of the operations. And he or she is the pointy end of the stick. And, you know, in my judgment, this is good governance practice. And that's why we have it so virtually universally across the country. And CAOs are trained. They're trained to be city managers. So usually they have some kind of professional designation, an engineer or an accountant or a planner, and then they take training to be a city manager. Any questions about that? I just wanted to say, you know, we're very fortunate in British Columbia to have a nonpartisan public service. All members of the Local Government Management Association, which is virtually every municipality in the province, they have a code of ethics. This is important to them, that they be nonpartisan. And this is sometimes hard to understand, but in my own case, when I saw in my community the political ideologies change from one council to the next, we had a superb CAO, and he served me and my council in exactly the same way as he served the next council, which was ideologically very different. And he had this great, you know, stone face. You never really knew what he was thinking. There's still some things I don't know what he was thinking. But, you know, council should encourage this. They should encourage a nonpartisan professional staff. The staff should never get involved in the politics. It's death, in my view. And it's a way to keep the operations of the organization running smoothly, even though the governing body may change. So this is just a little chart about the separation between governance and operations. So the focus of the council is to set direction and the vision for the community. The focus of the staff is to implement the direction set by a council or board. The council makes decisions, sets policy, and the staff manage the day-to-day operations. And in terms of responsibilities, the council approves plans, budgets, sets priorities, service levels, adopts bylaws and policies, and monitors performance. And the staff delivers services efficiently and effectively, management staff and resources, implement policies and bylaws, and then reports to council. So you can see when you begin to think of this as governance and operations, there should be a clear distinction there between the two. And the council is accountable to the public through elections, and the staff's accountable to council. So very cleanly structured, I think. And the more you can kind of reinforce this as an elected official, the better the chances that you'll be a high-functioning local government. Because there are lots of local governments that aren't so high-functioning, right? So what does the job really look like? I meant to go and look at how many pages a recent agenda was. Do any of you who are elected know how many pages your last agenda was?
109.
How many?
109.
109?
190.
90.
Mind you, like 60 of it was summarized. So.
Yeah. So there's a lot of reading. Yeah. And some municipalities are upwards of thousands, and regional district agendas are completely out of control. So, and you're actually responsible for that. Like, you need to know what's in there, right? So finding ways to manage that amount of information is really challenging, right? Because you just can't read that stuff, right? Now at least you have ChatGPT, you can dump it in and summarize it, right? But it is, this job requires processing a lot of information. And that a part of it is, I think people find very challenging. It's a huge time commitment and a workload if you're going to do it well. I mean, I had one counselor who consistently walked in, this is when we had paper agendas, so would walk into the meeting opening the envelope, that just doesn't work for me, So if you're going to do a good job, you really need to process that information somehow and learn how to do that effectively. You all of a sudden become very visible. And so going to the grocery store, going to the post office, you're visible, and people hold you to account. It can be very intrusive if you're a kind of a private person. So you need to find ways to manage that. Lots of relationships, so lots of people want to talk to you all the time. And you might find that you need to balance your governance responsibilities and your professional obligations or your work obligations or whatever. I mean, there is a balancing act there because it takes a lot of time. Thank you. You might have expectations around meeting the media, talking to the media, responding, and you need to figure out what you're comfortable with and what you should do and what you should say no to. Because remember, if you're not the mayor, probably ought not to be regularly talking to the media. There's a lot of talk these days around stress management and resilience. And managing the pressures of the job, especially in the face of social media and lots of abuse. And then if you lose an election, it's kind of soul crushing. and you need to manage that. I'm really making this sound like a great job, eh? Don't sugarcoat it. Yeah, well, I'm kind of known for that. You need to make, decisions that really affect people's lives, like land use decisions, right? The zoning of a piece of property or a piece of property next door to somebody's house, these decisions can really affect people. Not just financially, but personally, right? So they can be weighty decisions. You have to look after the infrastructure and capital planning for the organization, right? These are this big box. You have to pass a budget every year and set those tax rates. That's a real fun time because everybody hates you, for sure. And especially, I think, right now, we just have, just uncontrollable, well, I shouldn't say uncontrollable, but we have the pressures of inflation and rising costs and, there's a lot of financial pressure on local governments, not to mention the new services that are just expected of local government to take on, like homelessness and affordable housing, and which 20 years ago just was not part of what local governments did, but now it's just an expectation. And then, community services. Anything that anybody would like to add to that? It's not an easy job. It can be very satisfying and rewarding if you can get stuff done that your community wants and appreciates. It can be incredibly satisfying. I had my daughter not too long ago come home one day. She's grown now, and she had driven through the main street of Brentwood Bay, which is my neighborhood, and this sounds like a trivial thing, but it was very gratifying. She said to me, God, whenever I see those magnolias in bloom, I think of you. Think of all those council meetings you went to, right? It was a really tough project, but the community's happy, and you think, you can forget all of the challenges and just see the good things you did. Or, I was very pleased about a sewer system we put in, real public health stuff, right? It's good. So you feel good in the end, but it's not an easy job. It's a significant commitment, can be highly rewarding, but also demanding. And so you really want to think about setting some expectations for yourselves, and really, I would encourage you to go to a council meeting and imagine yourself sitting on the other side of the table. Like, what is that going to feel like to be over there and have people heckling you? I like to think that councils are stewards of their community. Like, you're there for 4 years, 8 years. I think some of you guys in Spelupton, you've been here for ever, right? Like, long.
On council for 8 years, but indirectly involved for 25 years.
Yeah.
So it's a big commitment. I will just say on your time.
Yeah.
I was going to run for council many years before. When you have a business, you can't do both
Yeah.
working and software. And it's just, you have to,
Yeah.
not semi-retired, but if you want to put your whole heart into it,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of
Yeah.
Not being negative, but that's
No, but that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So you have to think about that. Can you make that time, right?
And if you have a young family too, that doesn't tell either.
Yeah. I told my daughter used to come to me and in the afternoons and sit in the council meeting, and I told her as a young teenager, I said, you better start saving for therapy, because this is going to bend your mind. So I just sort of want to talk a little bit about what you're stewarding, right? If you're the governing body, and we're back to the single employee thing here, you're responsible for this whole organization, right? The whole hullabaloo. Ultimately, the buck stops at mayor and council. And yeah, I don't have the data on Armstrong, but this is from the 2024 annual report. And if you haven't read the annual reports of the municipality you're interested in, you should go and read them. They're really a great kind of summary of what's going on in the municipality. So Spallancheen, 5 managers, 5 full-time inside staff, 7 full outside staff, 9 casual, and it's unionized. So, you know, at the end of the day, you're responsible for this organization. You're the board of directors, right? And then, again, in the annual reports, you get the financial statements. I love going to these because they tell me a lot about a community. So I know, I apparently don't have a life, right? But every community I go into, I go right to the financial statements. So this is a statement of operations. So the revenues for the city of Armstrong in 2024, so this was the last one I could get, the revenues, yeah, you took in about 11 million and spent about 9 million. And, you know, there's some big things like the government transfers, so there's grants and stuff that sort of distort these numbers in the end. And that's probably why there's a gap between the revenue and the expense. They probably got a big grant and haven't spent it yet. But so it's a $10 million operation. This isn't something you're running off of the back of an envelope. It's a lot of money, and it's taxpayers' money, right? And then here are the tangible capital assets. So tangible capital assets, City of Armstrong, is $56 million. So the value of the asset, I'm not an accountant, right? So anybody who wants to call me out on this, I'm happy to be corrected. But this is my sort of big picture of the view thing. You know, over the years, the City of Armstrong has built up this worth. You got $56 million worth of capital assets, and they need to be maintained. So again, you're not doing this off of the side of a envelope, and you need professional staff or, outside consultants or whatever to help you make sure that you steward this in a way that's in the best interest of the community. And then Spallancheen is so interesting too, because it's very similar. So expenses in Armstrong are about 9 million, in Spallancheen a little less than 11 million. You had more revenue, but you can see that there's some big grants up there, some big government transfer grants. But very similar kind of budget. And capital assets, $51 million worth of assets. So this is at the heart, I think, of what your responsibility is. Provide services, set the service levels, deal with all the land use stuff, and look after these assets, manage the money. And I don't think that people, when they get elected, realize that this is such a significant part of the job. You're managing all of this taxpayers' hard-earned money, and you better do good with it, right? Does any of that surprise anybody? Realize the scale, even for small communities like Armstrong and Spallancheen, small in population, big assets and big responsibilities. And I don't know what your asset management planning is like, but lots of communities your size haven't been looking after those assets for the last 50 years. So there are big, you're smiling because there's big asset management money.
I got my own.
So in my view, this is a very important part of the job, is to look after these assets and to look after the resources of the municipality, both the financial resources and the human resources. And so every decision that a council makes, has financial, ethical, fairness implications, right? As I said earlier, there isn't one public. There's a whole bunch of publics, and some people want this, and other people want that. Some people want a new, pickleball courts, and somebody wants affordable housing, or somebody wants a 10-story building on their property, and somebody wants a piece of park, and they're value decisions. There's not necessarily a right answer, right? You can't just go to a textbook and say, oh, well, this is the right answer. They're value decisions, and that's big part of what council does, is wrestling with that. Okay, well, what's fair? What's in the best interest of the community? What's going to help us economically? How much do we spend on, maintaining our sewer pipes, and how much do we spend on building a pickleball court? So just a few other things. This is a whole catch bag of things that I just think maybe people might be interested to know. You might have heard of, codes of conduct, ethical conduct. This has been a very big topic in BC over the last 10 years or so. So there's something called the Working Group on Responsible Conduct. It's a group of the province, Union of BC Municipalities, and the Local Government Management Association, and they've been working to try to set some standards for conduct. And Bill 17, the bill that I talked about that got partway through the House in the spring and will come back in the fall, is a product of their work. So these are the foundational principles of responsible conduct: integrity, accountability, respect, leadership, and collaboration. I mean, nothing mysterious there, but we've got lots of conduct problems in BC around council tables. You probably read about them in the news. Kamloops might come to mind. There's 20 years ago, there was no need to have a code of conduct. Now we have to have a code of conduct, and we have to have sanctions, and we have to have ways of managing bad behavior. So I expect that when this legislation goes through, every new council will have to adopt a code of conduct. It'll be a requirement, and then you generally have to sign it, and then you have to comply with it, and if you don't comply, then there's going to be punishment. How to get stuff done. We were talking earlier about councils. You campaign as individuals, and then you come together and you have to function as a collective. It always seems to be a bit of a mystery to newly elected officials. How do you get your idea on the table? How do you advance something, right? And typically I think the mayor should help individual councillors with that, but you also have to build a constituency around the table where you have some support, because if you're a council of 7, you have to have 4 people who want to do the same thing that you want to do. Otherwise, you're not getting anywhere, right? So you have to get something on the agenda, and then council needs to make a decision either by bylaw or by resolution. And all decisions must be voted on council, and most need a majority vote. So some need a 2/3 vote, and at the regional district it's a whole different voting system. But nothing happens unless council votes on it. Like if there isn't a resolution that's just voted on, recorded in the minutes, nothing happens. So you've got to get it on the agenda, and you've got to get council talking about it, and you've got to get them making a decision. So, and that really requires collective action. Yeah, and so how do you make decisions? Only by bylaw or resolution, or by bylaw. And the legislation typically says this must be done by bylaw, and these other things can be resolutions. So the really important things, like your budget, has to be passed by bylaw. And there's a series of steps in doing. It's a little more complicated decision-making process. Everybody know what in camera means? right? So the default in British Columbia is that all of your work must be done in open. Everything you do must be done in open. And then there are a few exceptions. So the starting point is everything, because the public should see what you're doing, right? Public should hear the discussion. So there are these exceptions. So labor, if it's a personnel matter, it can be done in camera. If it's got some litigation involved, and it could be done in camera because it would be an advantage for your opponent to know what's going on. And there are certain land items like acquisition or expropriation that can be done in camera. Not all land things, just a few specific things. And if you're going into in camera, you have to state which one of these things, which one of the exceptions is the justification for going in camera. Otherwise, you need to do everything in public. And then there's the whole thing around conflict of interest, and I'm not going to say more than just to say you need to be very much aware of this, that if you have some kind of pecuniary interest, some kind of money interest in something, you can't be involved in the decision. You need to leave the meeting. And there's, you know, if you're elected, there's lots of training around this. So you can get legal advice. Do I have a conflict of interest? But you need to pay attention to this, because say you participated in a vote, let's say you participated on a vote on a bylaw, and then your participation was challenged legally and the bylaw was determined to be not valid because of your vote, well, you've lost the whole process. So you want to be really careful about this. And then just about bias, you know, there's a well-known court decision, and the judge said, elected officials are expected to have an open mind, but not an empty mind. So you can have an opinion about something before a decision is made, but you ought not to say, and this is important in a campaign, I'm going to make this decision. This is my position, and I'm never changing that position, because that's a closed mind. You always have to have an open mind. So in the election process, you might want to think about some of those things where you might feel very hard-lined about. You know, the diversity around the table, having a bunch of different voices around the table, different ages, different ethnicities, genders, this really makes you stronger, even though sometimes it makes things harder, makes the decision-making process harder. But it really is a strength, not a weakness. You just got to figure out how to get along. And I just suggest you know your moral compass, because it'll be tested. You know, all kinds of people will want to take you out for lunch and chat you up and send you things, give you bottles of wine, take you out for dinner, you know. And it's really helpful to know kind of where your moral compass is, and to maintain your integrity. I'd like to suggest that you pay attention to your official community plan, and I think Spallanchein's is from 2011, and I don't pretend to know a lot about this. I'm just looking at the date, and Armstrong's is quite fresh, but this is the guiding document for your community. It is, I'm a planner, I have this bias for sure, but this tells you it should be a 20-year plan. It should tell you where this community is going over the next 20 years. And everything that the community does ought to be consistent with this. And in fact, the legislation says you can't make decisions that are inconsistent with the official community plan. So if you're running for office, you should have a little read of that document. Super powerful and super important. And just a little bit of advice, I'm almost done here, from the trenches. Understand your roles, super important. Uphold the foundational principles of responsible conduct. ensure you have quality orientation at the beginning of your term of office. Like council should say, we need to know what we're doing. We need this, we need more of it, we need to go to LGLA, we need to bring somebody in. Like council has that ability to say that and to allocate the resources to do that. So I really encourage you to make sure that happens. Good quality orientation. Be honest, ask lots of questions. I'm a big believer in strategic planning. Like you should be setting your priorities at the beginning of your term and then lay out a plan for what you want to get done in the 4 years, because 4 years will go really fast. So figure out what it is that you want to do, what's on the books already, what's already underway, and maybe there's so much work underway that you can't take on anything new. Your job is to just make sure to get the stuff done that's already underway. Remember that elected officials work in a world of compromise. Like you're not going to get your way. You know, you need to compromise and work with others and make this collective voice be heard. Diversity is a strength. And respect the democratic process. You know, majority rules. There'll be probably lots of 4-3 votes and you'll be on the losing end, and it really sucks. It's really hard to take. But in the end, if you believe in democracy, majority rules, and you need to move on, and you need to do whatever you have to do to live with the fact that you were not on the prevailing side. I'm dealing with a elected official right now who's having a lot of trouble with that. And he just got unelected, actually, from one of his positions. So, you know, you just have to learn to accept majority rules. And what does it take to be a successful member of council? Well, good listening skill, more listening than talking, ability to process a lot of information, a real fierce commitment to the law, to be doing things legally, a real commitment to the foundations of principles of responsible conduct, so conducting yourself in accordance with those 4 principles. Clarity of purpose, know why you're on council and work hard to realize your purpose. High ethical standards and a lot of hard work. I think it's a very, very steep learning curve. You will get elected and almost immediately you will have to deal with the budget, which is so much fun, you know? But right away, you're going to have to be dealing with tough financial choices. It's almost, just because of the timing of our cycles, it's almost the first thing. I see your head nodding, right? It's almost the first thing. You know, you're barely elected, and the budget lands on your desk, and you got to make a decision, right? And then, you know, if you go away and do orientation and do LGLA and keep abreast of what's going on in the local government world, it's a really steep learning curve, and it will carry on throughout the term. And I've just listed some sources of information that you might want to. There's the BC Ombudsperson, by the way.
Are these slides going to be?
Yeah, I'm happy to give them to Patty. And where did Patty go to?
She's just in there.
Oh, yeah. I'm happy, and she can make them available to you. Yeah.
If you've left your email address when you signed in, we can send them to you via email. If you haven't and you'd like them, if you just put your email address in the sign-in sheet, we'll make sure you get them.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you. So questions? Surely I haven't turned you all off. There was such enthusiasm when I first arrived. Questions? Yeah.
Well, first, thanks for being here.
Absolutely my pleasure.
Well, I'm giving, I think, what must be a level-handed way of this is how it is, and I think that's good to hear. My question is to what degree does the provincial government have to load responsibilities onto municipal governments, and to what extent does that represent their workload generally?
Like what percentage of what?
Could be a percentage.
Oh. I don't know, but I can tell you here, you know, what has happened over the last 20, 30 years is this shift, particularly of social services, off of the province onto local governments. And you know, they're just wicked problems, not easy to solve. Even if you throw money at them, they're not easy to solve. And you know, because our system, you know, our whole system of local government in Canada was set up to provide services to property. That's why you call it property taxes. You know, water, sewer, you know, services to property. And over time, we've, you know, gotten into all kinds of lines of business that were not anticipated. Even something like recreation, right? What I'd call a soft service and an expensive service. Parks, trails. But those, I think local governments were able to manage, and there was support from taxpayers for those services. But this move into social services, so safe injection sites, affordable housing, homelessness, healthcare, you see, God, communities in my area opening health clinics paid for by property taxes, like it just makes my head explode. So it's those social services that I think local governments have found a lot of difficulty managing. Plus, I will just say that, you know, most local governments don't have the professional expertise to really even oversee those services, right? So the services to property, we got engineers and technicians and stuff, and we can do that, and we're well equipped to do that kind of thing. The social service thing, you know, some of the big cities have staff, professional staff, but for sure I would have to assume that Spalding and Armstrong, neither organization has a social planner or a healthcare planner or anything, right? This has been that transition has been very challenging. So I couldn't give you a percentage, but they're big, costly things that even if you have money, you can't, it's really difficult to solve.
You probably incur a lot too, like a lot of responsibility and a lot of liability as well.
Yeah.
Suppose that those
Yeah.
expenses.
Yeah, you know, I've done quite a bit of work for the city of Nanaimo, who have, you know, really, really challenging social problems in their city, and man, they have thrown so much money. They've been devoted to it, but even they're still, you know, here we are in this term of office, 4 years later, still really struggling. So maybe less of a problem here. Lucky you guys, but in bigger cities, really challenging. But yeah, there has been the whole housing shift, downloading from the province has been really significant. Really taken a lot of staff time over the last term of office. Yeah. Other questions?
I'd be curious with your experience, you talk about strategic planning and vision, and where the OCP fits within
Oh,
that.
such a great question.
I just see, I look across different municipalities recently, and it's like the OCP has become their vision,
Yeah.
and they've lost their sense of where their municipality is going. So I'd just be curious what your view is.
Well, you know, most local governments spend so much energy and money on an official community plan now. I mean, it's not a small enterprise. And if it's done well, it should be a 20-year plan for the municipality, and it should have the vision, the future vision of the municipality in it. So when I do strategic planning, I always start with the official community plan. We're not creating a new vision. You've got a vision here. There's literally, in most official community plan, there is a vision, right? And there's a set of objectives. This is the kind of community we want. This is what we're building. This is where the infrastructure is going to go. You know, that's all been vetted by the public, right? Usually huge, in the Armstrong case, right? Huge public process, public's really involved. And you have this document, so you should use it, and that should be driving your strategic planning. Here are the priorities. This is where we're going.
I'm not talking about our style. Just want to make that clear.
It's already a politician.
Voice, do as you need to.
So I, if the official community plan doesn't represent the direction your public wants, then you need to redo your official community plan. That's what I think. If you didn't get it right, then you need to, and listen, I haven't looked at Spolimpsheen's official community plan, but if it hasn't been kept up to date and it's 15 years old, it probably is time for a bit of a refresh, especially in this term of office. That would make it 20 years, right? So it would be, but there are other places that have a plan that they're brilliant and they can just carry on and they just tweak it as time goes on. But I really think it's such an important document.
On our community plan, we take it one step at a time. When it comes up through, we'll look at that at the time instead of going over the whole thing. I know it's getting older, but that we don't have a whole lot of, say, you want to call them bad things or whatever, but
Yeah.
if there is something that's not, we
Yeah.
look at it at the time.
Yeah. Well, I sort of assume with Spolimpsheen, probably the vast majority of your land is in the ALR. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that makes it much easier, for sure. Like the community I came from, 70% of the land was in the ALR. So we're just dealing with these little neighborhoods, right? So yeah, it is a slightly different kind of scene. But as long as the plan lays out where you're going, if you can see in 20 years where you want to be, great. That's good. Then it should be driving your priorities. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, Spolimpsheen also has a community development plan, which sort of, it builds off of the OCP to lay the roadmap of how they're going to achieve those goals for a short-term, medium-term, and long-term
Beautiful.
priorities.
Yeah.
So that is revisited by council on a more frequent basis in the OCP because of the cost involved. It's
Yeah.
sort of a fiscally responsible way to
Yeah.
make sure there's a roadmap for the citizens.
Yeah, perfect. And that's what you want. You want a roadmap. Like sometimes councils come in and they think, oh, okay, we're going to reinvent where this community is going, like every 4 years. No. It needs to be a much longer. And, part of that is because particularly in terms of infrastructure, you need to have a long-term plan. You're putting a pipe in the ground, it's going to be there for 100 years. So you want to make sure that you're driving in one direction. Anything else? Just tell me that I haven't completely discouraged you. I'm going to feel really bad if I have. I feel really bad. Sorry?
I just said we're back.
We're not coming back. We're done.
Well, I want to just comment actually. Like I like that you brought up like open mind and that kind of stuff. I know my philosophy personally is I make my decisions, and I think I know it 51%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I let that other 49, like a good argument comes up the other way, change your mind.
Yeah.
And you know what? I've been stubborn on things. I have decided to just plug my ears and not listen and decide that I'm going to vote one way, and then majority rules, and I was voted against, and you know what? It was probably the right direction.
Yeah.
Whatever, but that's why you have a team of 7 people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I think it's really great that you can actually admit that, because I think that's kind of where you want to get to, right? Like, you can think, okay, well, maybe I'm not always right? Maybe. But, yeah, and that is why you have 7 people, because you don't want one person doing this. Like, it's a really bad idea, because not one of us could really do this very well. It needs to be a collective, it needs to be a team. Yeah.